Do you eat, sleep, dream about anything related to eye care?
So do we. This is See What We See with Lauren and Martin. My name's Lauren Cashin.
And I'm Martin LeBeau. We want to share anything that's cool about eye care.
We want you to see what we see. So sit back and enjoy.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of See What We See with Lauren and Martin. Hi, Lauren. How are you?
I'm doing great, Martin. How are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you very much. Got a little bit of snow the past couple of days, but we'll get through it, right?
Well, you're the optimistic guy. I wouldn't say a little bit of snow. I'd say a heck of a lot of snow, but that's fine. We live in Canada.
It's a good workout. Come on.
It's a great workout, going for those walks, trudging through snow up to your knees, good cardio. But anyways, it's a beautiful scene. We'll look at the positive side.
Well, we live in Canada, so we need to expect these things, right?
Exactly.
But anyways, we digress. We have a great topic to speak about today. It's something that we've talked about, you and I, for a while now. It's at least a couple of years, but I know it's been out there for much longer than that. There's been a lot of progress going forward with that. We're talking about myopia management today. How can we even get the ball started? Because there's so many things to talk about, right, Lauren?
Oh, there sure is. You know, when I think about some of this stuff we've read over the years, and I'm going back a number of years, as you say, you know, everything from they're putting atropine in kids' eyes so that when they read, they don't focus. They were putting +3 readers on them every single time, thinking, stop the accommodation. This will, you know, it's all about accommodation. It's, you know, we know it's more than just accommodation. It's natural light is necessary to keep an eyeball at the right shape. It's close work. It's so much more complicated. And I think it's a great topic to address right now because, as we know, there's products coming out a lot faster than we've seen before, whether it's contact lenses, glasses. I'm sure there's a lot of orthoptists and all that. I'm sure there's training things coming out. But anyways, I'm digressing. I think that the biggest thing for us to talk about would be products.
Absolutely. And we're lucky today. This podcast is sponsored by CooperVision. Thank you very much, CooperVision. And that leads us to speak to somebody that knows a lot about this topic. And Lauren, if you could, I would like you to introduce our speaker for today.
My pleasure, Martin. Thank you. So then, Martin, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest for today and our great colleague, Amy Chow. Hey, Amy, how you doing?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm Amy, and I am the Professional Affairs Manager for CooperVision Canada. I am a registered optician in Ontario, and I also have a fellowship with the American Academy of Optometry.
Great. Hi, Amy. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you very much. So let's just get the ball rolling. What's myopia management?
So I would say, you know, we got to start from the beginning, right? Why is myopia management even a thing right now? Why do we care about myopia management? And that's because I would say over the last few decades, starting in the 2000s, we really started seeing an increase in cases of myopia, especially in children. So in the early 2000s, I would say, you know, we were at about a 28% prevalence. Right now, we're sitting at about 40% or more, and the World Health Organization actually predicts by 2050, we're going to be reaching about 50% in the global population. Now, I personally think that this number might be underestimated, and that really is because COVID and lockdowns and at-home learning for children has really exacerbated this problem. And that really is because of the visual inputs that they're, you know, put in front of. So if we go back again, historically, human beings were adapted for outdoor life as hunter-gatherers, as farmers, and more we're seeing, you know, an adaptation to an indoor, near visual input sort of lifestyle. And that is causing this sort of boom, so to speak, when it comes to myopia progression.
So Amy, I hear what you're saying, and we've even heard the term myopia epidemic, but who cares? So I'm going to wear glasses. I'm going to be a little more short-sighted. Is that a big deal? I know it is, but I'd like you to explain to our listeners, why is it a big deal? We sell glasses for a living, so that's one thing. So that's, but from the overall picture here is, so people put on a pair of glasses. So next year you go from a -1 to a -2. Tell us, what's the big deal?
The big deal is if you leave myopia progression unchecked, we actually get to a level, and some researchers such as Mark Bullimore would actually argue that there is no safe level of myopia. Now, what we deem as high myopia in research is a -5 or a -6. And at that point, the axial length of the eye will reach about a 26 millimeter. So that's the danger zone where we get into pathological myopia. And that's what we're concerned about. With pathological myopia and high levels of myopia, we're looking at increased risk of diseases such as retinal detachment, myopic maculopathy, cataracts, and glaucoma. So that's really what we're trying to prevent. The myopia from getting to a certain level where it puts this child in their middle years at risk of these, so to speak, diseases.
So is there an age that you start worrying about this?
I would say as soon as you develop myopia at any age, not only do you need to correct it, you need to treat it. Now, we understand that the earlier we catch it, so the younger the child is, the more sensitive they are to visual inputs, the more sensitive they are to the triggers for myopia progression. And so the younger they are, the more sensitive they are to the environmental factors that will trigger myopia progression, and the faster they will progress. And so the younger you catch it, I would say, absolutely, you need to get them into a myopia management treatment program as soon as possible. So that's really, really important for us to understand.
So Amy, like most ACP know that a child eye growth should stop around 10, 12 years old. So how do you recognize if a child is in need of closer follow-up? Do we look at the parents? Do we look at how much the prescription changed? Is it every 6 months? Is it every 2 years? How do we determine that?
So I would say that, we really want to follow the guidelines that is set out by the optometrist college. And they do recommend, the first eye exam at 6 months of age. Now, children go through a natural emmetropization process. So they start out at around a +2, and that plus power, so they are hyperopic, and that plus power eventually slowly decreases until they become plano at around, like you said, 10 years old average. Now, if we look at risk factors, so when both parents are myopic, the chances of that child becoming myopic is about 50%. If one parent is myopic, there's a chance of 1 in 3 that child will become myopic. And even if neither parent is myopic, there's still a 25% chance that child will develop myopia. So take, for example, my 8-year-old son. At 8 years old, we're expecting that he should have at least about a +1/4 under cycloplegic refraction. So cycloplegic refraction is very, very important when we determine the baseline levels of refractive error in children, because children will tend to accommodate, and they will accommodate through anything. So by knocking out their accommodation ability, then we get the true prescription of that child. So under cycloplegic refraction, my 8-year-old son is a plano, where he really should, at this point, have some plus reserves. So right now, he's not quite minus yet, but I would say that he is high risk because he doesn't have enough plus reserves and he's got 2 myopic parents. So his risk factor, it's not a matter of if he'll become myopic, it's just a matter of when. So I tend to monitor these types of children every 6 months. Now, if you follow the guidelines of optometry, the recommendation is at least once a year that a child gets an eye exam. If the ECP notices a child that is higher risk, I would say a closer follow-up is necessary. So every 6 months is my recommendation.
When we were talking just before we got onto this podcast, you mentioned something about, having children to go outside, exercise their vision a little bit more in that natural environment and everything else. Because some of the concerns is that spending so much time in front of a computer and tablets and things like that, unfortunately, elevates the risk of myopia. But when we first started talking about doing this podcast, I got a little excited and I started researching different things. But one thing I couldn't find information much on is about diet. This today's diet in terms of food, I don't want to put you on the spot either here, but with some of the food that we ate with the HGH hormones and stuff like that in the food, do you think that could contribute to the eye growing larger than what it should in children?
So most of the myopia management research really hasn't focused on diet. And you're right, there is not a lot of publications or research on this area. Perhaps that's a focus that people should work on in the near future. But in terms of preventative measures, there's several things we know. Number one is to limit near work. Because of the near visual inputs, this really is an environmental trigger for myopia progression. And one of the key things that we really want to encourage is a minimum of 2 hours of outdoor time. So outdoor time is not just about the distant visual inputs, but the level of light. So the lux of the light that you get outdoors, you really can't simulate that indoors. With whatever lamps, artificial lamps, you just can't simulate that level of light. And research has shown that it's the light levels that trigger this dopamine production that allows that eye to not elongate. So there has been research studies where they basically cut off dopamine production, and it basically just triggered the eye just to elongate at an exponential level.
I actually read a study where they used chickens and they controlled the dopamine levels in chickens and they became myopic. So we're talking about kids and we're talking about by 12 and these different things, but we see a lot of myopia creeping through the teenage years. And even what I experienced myself, when I was 18, I was a -1. And I had been a horrible student. I never really read a lot, so I didn't probably do a lot of close work. But at 18, I got into the optical business. And I started doing a lot of close work and then opening my own practice and edging all day. And, you're holding things very, very close. So my near work went through the roof. Today, as a senior, but let's go back a number of years, I went from a -1 to a -3 and change, and with next to no sill, now I've got, a diopter in one eye and 3/4 in another. So, and even watching our patients, is it adults too? Like, your late teens, early 20s, is the eye going to grow if you do a lot of accommodation? Is that documented anywhere?
So there is a natural progression in terms of axial length growth. So when we measure axial length growth, and this is pretty much the definitive measurement when it comes to myopia control. So a lot of myopia management practices, we highly encourage them to invest in biometry and to measure the axial length of their children to determine the efficacy of the treatment program that they've enrolled the child in. So we know that as a child grows from childhood to adult, there is natural axial progression. So you'll go through some natural spurts. So when they're young in the 6 and 7 age range, and then again, when they're going through puberty, you're going to see some accelerated growth in those time periods. Once you reach adulthood, it really should be slowing down and, stabilizing. And we usually see that stabilization based on research happen around 16, 17 years old. Now, definitely we are seeing more and more. So there hasn't really been any research on myopia management in adults. Now I understand I'm not really answering the question about myopia management in adults because it is not very well understood. I have seen people engage in ortho-K well into adulthood. And that's only really because they like the freedom from contact lenses and glasses in their daytime activities, right? That's what Ortho-K provides. Ortho-K also provides myopia management, but the adults who are engaging in Ortho-K, they're more doing it for the lifestyle as opposed to the myopia management. So again, this really isn't something that we've studied, but we definitely know, and I've heard anecdotally, actually from Dr. Maria Liu from Berkeley, and she said that her middle-aged husband actually progressed 2 diopters after lockdown. So pandemic-related progression as well. So we know that it's most likely due to the near visual inputs because we're locked up at home, we're doing a lot of near work, we're meeting our colleagues on Zoom and on computers instead of in person.
So Amy, if a parent comes into my office tomorrow morning and hands me a prescription and says, yeah, my optometrist talked to me about myopia management and everything else, and they're going to ask me right away, okay, so what's the difference? Why would I not use what you've done for us in the past compared to myopia management lenses? What are the advantages? Why should I start now? Why not maybe wait till next year, till my son is a little bit older and won't break his glasses 3 times this year?
Yeah, because like I mentioned previously, as soon as you discover myopia, as soon as it's diagnosed in a child, we know it's going to progress. And that's the argument for why you need to put that child in some form of myopia control immediately, because we know it's going to progress. Now, in terms of, why the previous method isn't good enough is because it's not controlling the myopia. It's not managing the myopia. What I can say is that previously, there was little understanding and there wasn't a lot of education in our industry on why we should be engaging in myopia management, but that really has picked up steam in the last few years. So, it's never too late to start. I would say as opticians, this isn't really something that, we've really looked at or been educated on. And so, not knowing is, you're not at fault for not knowing. But now that we do know, then we have to do everything within our power to do the best for the child and to provide the treatment that is needed.
Well, I totally agree with you on that. That's a responsibility as eye care professionals. But sorry, again, I'm going to press a little bit more on this, not putting you necessarily on the spot either. But I know I'm thinking of a couple of clients in my practice right now and patients, and I'm like, okay, they're going to want numbers. They're going to want definite studies. They're going to want this. I was reading somewhere a few months ago that every diopter that you can save decreases about 40% of risk. Is that an accurate number?
That is accurate. So for each diopter that you're saving, you're reducing the risk of myopic maculopathy by 40%. And that is actually the most dangerous when it comes to the diseases that we're looking at, because cataracts can be treated, glaucoma can be treated to an extent. Retinal detachment, if you catch it early enough, you can treat it. It is very excruciating, but myopic maculopathy cannot be treated. So definitely, with each diopter that we're saving, we're reducing the risks exponentially. With each diopter of growth, you're increasing the risks exponentially. So that is the reason why we want to treat it as soon as possible.
Okay, Amy. So we've talked about the whole issue here and this epidemic. And we know that Cooper is very dedicated to helping the general public in this epidemic. So maybe you can tell us a little about, because Cooper's a contact lens company, and we know that you have a lens, which we'd love to hear about. And we know that there's something exciting coming down the pipe this year. So maybe you can start telling us a little about Cooper's products.
Yeah, CooperVision really is very invested in myopia management. We have a partnership with the World Council of Optometry that recently came out with a resolution in 2021 that myopia management really needs to be a standard of care across optometry practices. So this is really something that we are trying to promote. We're trying to advocate. And we're trying to get the message out there. So Martin, like you said, it's really hard to convince a 2-year-old who's myopic. Now, mind you, a 2-year-old who's myopic, that could be due to a systemic reason. So I would look into that a little bit more. But to convince a parent with a young child, to engage in myopia management, this is a difficult conversation to have. And that's why CooperVision is dedicated to not only sharing and promoting this message with the public so that we can share in that burden with ECPs, but we have a team of myopia management specialists that come into your practice and really help support you in training, in education, your education, as well as the patient's education on, how do you engage in myopia management and how do you present this to the patient? And we also have patient education as well. In terms of myopia management, CooperVision really is the leader because we have a whole platform of products. So you are probably very familiar with CooperVision's MySight contact lenses. It is the only on-label product that has Health Canada and FDA approval with an indication for myopia control. In addition to that, the CooperVision Specialty Eye Care Division owns Paragon CRT and a whole platform of Ortho-K lenses and solutions for myopia control. And sometime this spring, we will be releasing a myopia management spectacle lens. So really, it really depends on lifestyle when it comes to which method that parent and that child is going to choose. So whichever method you would like to engage in, CooperVision has a solution for you.
So with these products, without giving away proprietary intelligence information, can you give us an idea of what these products do? How does it arrest myopia from creeping?
So the technology or the mechanism of action that we try to apply for myopia management is really called the peripheral defocus theory. So if you think about a natural eye that is starting to elongate, if you put a single vision lens in front of that eye, you're bringing the light rays to land on the retina in the center, but that single vision lens is actually causing the light rays in the periphery to land behind the retina. And that is called hyperopic defocus. So with hyperopic defocus, that triggers that eye to start elongating. So what we're really trying to target is to bring those hyperopic light rays into the eye and create myopic defocus in the periphery. So by creating that myopic defocus in the periphery, that is the peripheral myopic defocus theory, where we are basically trying to alert the eye or the axial length to stop elongating.
So basically you're saying that, if I've said it in a very crude way, that the power of the lens deviates as it radiates out from the center of the lens. Would it be less minus power?
So depending on the method of myopia control that you're engaging in, and let's take MySight contact lenses, for example. MySight contact lenses works on this principle of myopic defocus. So we have a lens design that is a dual focus lens design, and it basically has 2 rings of distance correction and 2 rings of myopic defocus. So those treatment zones, what we call treatment zones, those 2 rings, they have a +2 of myopic defocus. So most of the myopia control products on the market, they work on this principle where we use plus in the periphery to create myopic defocus, to bring those light rays into the retina. So specifically with MySight contact lenses and the dual focus lens, we've got 2 rings of myopic +2 of myopic defocus, and these 2 rings really stay in the periphery where it needs to be. So if you look at some spectacle lenses that are on the market that also have a ring of plus that's meant to stay in the periphery, what happens is that when children actually look through that ring of defocus, they can't actually see. So compliance really decreases depending on how they're wearing those glasses and where they're looking through in those glasses.
It's very interesting, Amy. I mean, you mentioned about the contact lenses and all the spectacle lens that are coming out. Is this something that's going to be that can be able to work together in combination, or is it going to have to be kept separately? Because I don't know if I want, let's say, my 8-year-old in contact lenses 24/7.
Yeah, so with MiSight contact lenses, we do recommend full-time wear, and that's a minimum of 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. On the off time, we just recommend standard single vision lenses. If you double up on myopia control spectacles as well as contact lenses, this really isn't something that's been studied, and so it's not something that we promote. Sometimes it is an individual preference by the parent for a child who might be a fast progressor, and they might decide to choose to have myopia control spectacles in the off time. But I would say it's not necessary because we really don't know what these types of combination therapies will do because it hasn't been studied. So there are no research studies or papers that can speak to that. There are research studies on, for example, ortho-K plus atropine to increase the efficacy, but not really with soft contact lenses and spectacle lenses.
Yeah, there's still a lot of new things to discover along the way, of course, when it comes to something like this. Do you have an amount of time you think a child needs to stay within that management? Or is it something they have to do for the rest of their lives? Is it like a 2-year, 1 year, or is this on an individual basis?
Yeah, so again, we're really looking at, when that child stabilizes. So in their teen years, 17, 18, and that is determined by the ECP. So when you see that child come back for their annual exam and you notice, over the last couple of visits, they've really stabilized, then you can look at taking the child out of the treatment program. So take, for example, MiSight contact lenses. We have one of the most robust studies in the industry. It is a 10-year study. We are currently just past year 7. And what we did was in the first 3 years, we had a control group and we had a test group. So it was a double-masked randomized study. Now, what actually happened was, and our control group was in the CooperVision Pro Clear single vision lens, and the test group obviously in the MiSight lens. Now, what happened halfway through that study was that it became really, really obvious to the researchers who was in test and who was in control, because there was one group progressing and one group that was not progressing. And so it almost became like an ethical concern. So in phase 2 of the study, when we went from year 4 to 6, we put all the kids in MiSight. And then we noticed that the kids who were progressing initially, they eventually leveled out at the same control rate as the MiSight test group, which is 59% efficacy for controlling myopia progression. And then in year 7, what we did, and remember when we enrolled these kids, they were between the ages of 8 and 12. So in year 7, they're at that age where, we're starting to see that myopia level out. We're seeing stabilization happening. So I'm going to go back to that rebound, right? Rebound is really, really important. Whenever you engage in myopia management, we want to know what the rebound effect is. And so in year 7, we took the kids out of MiSight, put them back into ProClear, a single vision lens, to study the rebound effect. And the results were published last year, November, at the American Academy of Optometry, and there was no rebound. So very, very promising results. So I would recommend that you really keep that child, or even the teenager, if they're going to university and they're doing a lot of near work and they're still progressing, they really should not be switched or taken out of the myopia management treatment until that stabilization happens.
So Amy, the MiSight contact lens obviously is available at this time. Is there a rollout planned for 2022 for the new spectacle lens?
So the spectacle lens is something that we are very, very excited about because it works on a different mechanism of action. Like I mentioned previously, most myopia management products on the market work on this whole concept of myopic defocus. With our new launch of the spectacle lenses is actually working on a different mechanism of action, which is contrast reduction. And so that contrast reduction or that treatment zone covers the entire surface of that lens. So again, you're going to be increasing that compliance and efficacy when it comes to how that child wears those glasses. Remember, I mentioned that with most of the spectacle lenses that control myopia, that has this ring of plus, depending on where that child is looking through that lens, that may or may not be efficacious, because if they're looking through the plus, then obviously you're not really creating that myopic defocus in the periphery. So you really want to encourage that child to point their nose at what they're looking at when they're wearing those spectacles, similar to how you would, encourage a presbyope wearing progressives, right, on how to behave. Now, with the spectacle lenses that we're launching, that isn't a problem anymore because they are meant to look through the treatment zone, which is the full lens, because it's really just creating a little bit of contrast reduction. And just a little preview of these lenses and the premise that we're working on, there was a genetic discovery where high contrast signaling basically caused the eye to elongate and for myopia progression to occur. So the researchers came up with this technology where they reduced contrast just slightly and noticed that it had efficacy in controlling that myopia progression.
Who thinks of this stuff? It's like, you think of, as an optician, and we deal with light and lenses and focal lengths of lenses. So, the contact lens design makes sense to me. But who would think, to sit there and think that adjusting the contrast will actually have an effect? Very cool. Very cool. It just shows you the research and the visionaries that obviously work for Cooper.
Totally agree. I mean, that's a lot of great information, Amy, they just provided us today. For our listeners, is there resources that they can look at? They can just go on CooperVision's website to find more information about your contact lenses and the launch of your new spectacle lenses?
Yeah, if you go to the CooperVision website, we actually have just one page and one section that is dedicated to myopia management. So you'll be able to navigate to that page from the CooperVision Canada website and get more information from there.
We'll make sure that we put that on our social media and everything else when we put the podcast up. But yeah, Lauren, I mean, that's a lot of great information. I don't even know what else to ask because my brain is just exploding right now.
I don't either. I actually could sit here and keep pondering, and I would have questions, but it's a lot to digest. Maybe we could have Amy come back again. And then also, we're hoping to get a full presentation on this new lens, hopefully at Inside Optics, which is coming up in April. So we've started some initial talks on that. So that's wonderful, because by then I'm sure you'll have more to share with us on the new spectacle lens.
And maybe we'll get a sneak peek at those new spectacle lenses while we're there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely the launch is in early spring. I can say that the technology, if anybody is curious, is called diffusion optics technology. So if you look that up online, there's actually quite a bit of information and published studies on that technology already.
Cool. I'm writing that down because I'd love to read some more about this. I love new products. And as a professional, it's wonderful, even if you don't dispense these products, to have the knowledge about them. Referral is part of a healthcare professional's obligation. And it's just something, show your patients that you're educated in every direction in our field. And that really builds confidence with your patient to come back to see you. You stay their eye gal or eye guy, the trust is there. You go for the knowledge. And as opticians, being the front line of vision care, we're so accessible that knowledge like this is just amazing. And I think it's wonderful that you're educating us today on this. I really want to thank you for coming today. This is great. This is great. And like I said, hopefully we can continue this conversation later on, maybe another podcast or whatever.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. And I look forward to getting together with you guys again soon.
Sounds great. Thank you very much, Amy. Thanks to CooperVision as well to being on board and educating ECPs all along the way. Thank you so much. Hopefully, we get to see you soon.
Thank you.
Take care, Amy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Amy, for being with us today. What a great conversation we had. Lauren, there's so many options now, so many different ways to look at this, so many different perspectives. What did you get out of this yourself?
Well, I'm just really impressed how myopia control is branching out into so many different areas. As mentioned in the intro, we had using drugs to stop accommodation, glasses to restrict accommodation. Whereas now we see that it's not just about keeping the image on the eye. It's not about just reducing accommodation. It's not just about getting outside and looking at the horizon and natural light. Now we're talking about controlling contrast, which blows me away because it always, for people to think to go down that road, what a cool option. And it's really cool that CooperVision will be coming out with this new lens in 2022.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And it just shows you how companies like CooperVision are putting a lot of resources and research and development to come up with these products to help the population, to help with the kids. But at the end of the day, you and I both know that as great as these products are, the first thing is go outside, people. Bring your kids outside. It's important. Get some fresh air, rest the eyes from the computer screen, from the phone, from the TV, everything else. Go outside. But again, what a great conversation we had today. I really want to thank CooperVision again for being the sponsor of this podcast today. Lauren, it was great to talk to you. Can't wait for the next one. Stay tuned for the next episode of See What We See with Lauren and Martin. Hope you have a great day, Lauren.
Yeah, thank you. You too, Martin. Ciao for now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to See What We See. This podcast is brought to you by the Ontario Opticians Association. For more information or to become a member, go to our website at www.ontario-opticians.com. For all the latest updates, follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Ontario Opticians Association, on Twitter, OOA_frontline, and on LinkedIn, Ontario-Opticians-Association. Don't miss an episode of See What We See and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite streaming service. Thank you from the Ontario Opticians Association, the voice of opticians for 75 years.